Hey everyone, I am back after a long break from basically moving into my new home, so I've been pretty occupied with that. But I will be making videos regularly here again, and I want to start today with one that I promised I would do a while ago and then kind of got distracted by my move. But basically I want to demonstrate for you today how to use timecode to synchronize multiple cameras. And this is going to be a little bit of a lengthy video, but there's a lot of good information here, so get comfortable, grab a snack, and you'll find a lot of useful, enjoyable information here. So what is the problem? The problem here is that we want to be able to synchronize multiple cameras in post-production editing. And the traditional way we do that is to kind of line things up manually, look for similar waveforms on the audio, or look for maybe you have a clapper or a slate in your video, and you look for that and line those up. But there's a more precise, quicker way to do that, and that is to use timecode. Now, I did a video a couple months ago on the different synchronization signals that we use. So I covered genlock, timecode, and word clock. And timecode is the technology that we're going to be using this time. So if you want to understand a little better what timecode is, go back and watch the other video. I'll place a link to that up here if you're watching on a computer. So just to quickly summarize what was in that video that was related to timecode. Timecode is really just an audio signal, and all it tells you is the current frame number that you're on. That's it. It doesn't actually synchronize cameras in terms of making sure that they're all operating at the same frame rate, they're all starting at the top of the frame at the same time, and so forth. That's actually where genlock comes into play. For purposes of what we're doing today, we're just talking about synchronizing using timecode so that when you go to synchronize multiple cameras in editing, that they're all at the same point in time. So when you have an event that was recorded live, line up multiple cameras in editing so that the same event is happening on each of your different video clips from your different cameras. Now, the first thing we're going to need is a timecode source. Now, there's a lot of ways to do that. The one I'm going to be using here today is primarily going to be my ATEM 2ME Production Studio 4K switcher from Blackmagic Design. It actually does have XLR inputs and outputs on the back for timecode, and because it is always going to be synchronized with my video signal, that is an ideal source for timecode. But not all switchers have that. There are a lot that don't, and so we have to come up with another device. I've got another one here just behind me. This is an Evertz rack mount timecode. This will both display and generate timecode, so you can use it for either one. Another one that you might happen to have in your arsenal, if you've purchased one of these, this is the HybridX Studio HD Plus from Blackmagic. This has on the back timecode in and out. So if you have an SDI signal coming in that has timecode on it, the timecode output on here will actually give you an analog version of that, so you can use it elsewhere, use it with cameras or whatever. Then there are other devices on the market that can actually do the same kind of thing for generating timecode. So I've got one here. This is called a Tentacle Sync. I'll give you a little better view of that. So I've got two of these. These devices operate over Bluetooth to synchronize with a smartphone. They can also normally follow timecode, what we call jam sync, to another timecode source. So in theory, I should be able to take the timecode coming out of my ATEM switcher, run that into here, get these things synchronized, and then, because they maintain a very accurate signal, a very accurate clock, and then be able to disconnect and then continue to use these as timecode for other devices as well. So because of a small limitation in these devices where they will not synchronize to an ATEM switcher, I've been trying to work with technical support to get that resolved, and so far I've not had any luck. But because they are not able to do that, I'm going to have to use these as my timecode source, and so I'm going to show you how I'm going to use these to synchronize everything else in my workflow. The bottom line is you have to have some kind of device that's generating timecode, and you need to have that device set to the same video frame rate that you're recording, with one small caveat, and that's that timecode only operates at up to 30 frames per second. So if you're shooting at 60 frames per second, what you have to do is operate in 30 frames per second mode, and then it will actually work. So even though they're technically different rates, it will actually work properly, mainly because traditionally 30 frames per second in the interlace audio world was 60 fields per second. There was an upper field and a lower field, and that's used by devices that are running at 60 frames per second, 60 progressive frames per second, to determine whether you're on an even or an odd numbered video frame as part of your recording. So, but make sure that you're set at the same rate, and also make sure if you're operating in one of the markets around the world that operates at the fractional frame rates like 29.97 or 59.94, that you've got your devices, your timecode source set to utilize that instead of the whole numbers like 24, 30, or 60, and you correctly set them for drop frame or non-drop frame. So if you're wondering what that is, you can watch one of the other videos on my channel that talks about that, or find another video from another channel that covers drop frame versus non-drop frame. But bottom line is you need to have your timecode source operating at the same setting as your video that you're shooting is going to be. Now that said, if you have a camera that does not record at the same frame rate as say for a switcher that you're plugged into, say your switcher is running at 30 frames per second but your camera only does 24, you can still record timecode on there and it will still line up in post-production. It's just that the frame numbers that are included on timecode will not line up with the video frames that are on that device, so they will go out of sync very quickly. However, when you're synchronizing multiple cameras, that really doesn't matter. So bottom line is we need to have the same time code on all devices, and then we'll be able to sync those in post. Okay, now with that said, I'm going to start by getting out one of my Tentacle syncs here, and I'm going to use that to generate time code, and then I'm going to go ahead and sync my ATEM switcher to that, and then I'll start connecting into cameras and recording time code on those. Now, I'm really only having to go through this particular step because these Tentacle syncs will not synchronize to the ATEM switchers, and I'm going to use these as the source for everything else. So I've got these both turned on and they connect with Bluetooth over to a phone. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to tell it this is going to be my primary device, the one with the orange. So I select that in the list here, and then I say sync to this device and then sync all, and then after a couple seconds both of these devices will be completely in sync. So with that, I'm going to take the blue one, I'm going to set that aside, and we'll come back to that in a few minutes. Now that my orange Tentacle sync here is generating what's going to be my master time code, I need to start feeding that into other devices that will take time code in order to get those in synchronization with the Tentacle sync. So the first step I'm going to do is I'm going to plug the output of this into my ATEM switcher in order to get it to switch over. So I'm going to switch over wide here so we can actually see what's going on. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this cable here. It's got an 1/8 inch like the output on the bottom of the device on one end, and then an XLR on the other, and then this cable right here is plugged into the timecode input of my ATEM switcher. Now pay close attention to this timecode display right here, which is connected to my ATEM. This will tell you what's going on with the ATEM timecode, and I'm going ahead and plug that in, and we should see, there we go. It basically instantly locked to the timecode that's being generated by the Tentacle sync, and even when I disconnect, it will still continue to run, and that's what we call jam syncing. So now, at least for this point in time, this and my ATEM switcher are in sync, and they'll be on the same frame number. Now over time they can drift, so over the course of maybe an 8-hour day you might find that it's 1 or 2 frames out. So it's a good idea to go back and resynchronize like this periodically throughout the course of a shooting day in order to make sure that the devices are not getting too far out of sync from one another. The other thing you can do is you can actually take the output of this, leave it connected all of the time, and then use, like this right here is an XLR audio splitter. You can use that to split, so output of your Tentacle sync goes to both your ATEM and to a camera or whatever, and you just keep splitting the audio signal along each one. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take time code from the Tentacle sync, and we're going to sync the Ursa Mini camera that I have here using its timecode or reference input on the side there. So if we take a look at the side of the camera here, there is actually a BNC connection on there that's labeled ref in and TC in. That jack will either accept Genlock or timecode. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the output of the Tentacle sync. We've got an XLR adapter cable here, and then an XLR basically to BNC adapter going on over here. and then we're going to sync that. But I'm going to switch to the display of the camera so you can see timecode there in the upper center. And once I plug this in, there we go. Now the camera is jam synced to the Tentacle sync. Now what I can do is, just like with the ATEM, I can actually disconnect the XLR cable here, and the camera will continue to run timecode and basically stay in sync with the Tentacle sync, even though they're not physically connected. They both have highly accurate clocks in them, and they should stay accurate within a frame for several hours. And so with that, we actually have the Ursa Mini synchronized with the ATEM switcher, as well as my master source, which is my Tentacle sync. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to connect up a timecode generator, in this case the Tentacle sync, to a camera that does not have its own timecode input. In this case we're using a Sony PXW-X70. This does record timecode as part of our video clips, and it has an internal timecode generator, but it doesn't have an external timecode input, so you can't jam sync this camera to a timecode device like this or whatever else you happen to be using. Now, the way we do this is actually by taking advantage of the fact that timecode is just an audio signal. So what we can do is take the output of this on an XLR connection and plug that into an XLR input on the camera. Before we do that, we want to make sure that we've got some settings set properly in the camera. Now, when you set up a device like this, you will often have the choice between either mic level or line level output. In this case I'm using line level. That's far more common for timecode, but we need to make sure that the same setting is set on the camera as well. Otherwise our levels are going to mismatch, and either the signal is going to be too quiet or it's going to be too loud and it's going to distort. So we need to make sure we have those matched properly. So I've got my timecode generator set to line level, and then what I'm going to do is go over to the audio input on the side of the camera. I'm going to switch that up to line level. I'm going to turn off the low cut because we don't want to do any sort of equalization, no changing of the frequency response of the camera. Set that to line, and set that to low cut to off. That's also known as high pass filter. You want to make sure you turn that off. Turn off any other filters you got, like wind noise, anything like that. Make sure they're all off. And then I'm going to set the audio level on the channel that I'm going to use, channel 2, to manual. Now with that, what I can do is just go ahead and plug the XLR into the camera, and then with any luck we should see audio coming in on that input. I'm having to turn it up fairly high here, but that's okay. We just want to make sure that I know it's going to be hard to see, but we want to make sure that we're not distorting, so the level meter can't be pegged all the way to the right, and we also don't want it too low, so we don't want it where it's only showing 1 or 2 bars or no bars even. And with that, we actually have timecode data going into the camera. Now, what we do with this is, once we've shot everything for the day and we bring all the footage in for editing, we have a piece of software. In this case, they're one from the same people that make the Tentacle sync device. I'll demonstrate that here in a bit, where it's able to take that audio track and convert that into the metadata that our editing software uses in order to do the synchronization. So it converts it from sound into timecode data. The camera does not know how to do that. Our editing software does. And so I'll demonstrate how to do that here in a little bit. But what we've got here is we've actually got timecode going into the camera, being recorded on channel 2 of the audio, and then we'll be able to use that in editing. Now I should mention that when you're doing things using this method, you need to make sure that the timecode source stays connected to the camera, and that's why these things are little tiny like this, and they typically come with cables for connecting the camera. So you connect it and leave it connected. Because the camera does not know how to jam sync to this timecode source, that audio signal needs to be continuous. Sort of. Basically, the timecode really only needs to be present anytime you start recording a new video clip. So if you're in a situation where you can't afford multiple of these, or you can't get a hold of them for whatever reason, and you have multiple cameras you want to do, and you don't want to run splitters and run multiple cables to all your cameras, you plug this in, start recording disconnect, go plug it into another camera, start recording there. And the software only looks at the beginning of the clip to determine what the timecode information is there. So in a pinch, you can actually get away with one timecode source and with multiple cameras. Now I'm going to show you here in a minute how you can actually split the audio coming out of this to run the multiple cameras. That's just fine. But in a pinch, if you are not able to do that or you don't want to do that, you can just have this connected for a few seconds at the beginning of each video clip on each camera, and that will be enough in order to synchronize the cameras in editing. Okay, the next thing we're going to look at is how to get timecode into cameras that don't have an XLR input. So a lot of consumer style cameras might not have an XLR audio input. So how do you get audio in those? Well, they typically do have microphone inputs, so all you have to do is take advantage of that. Now these Tentacle sync devices actually do come with a cable that's specifically meant for this purpose, so it's not something you have to purchase after the fact with this product. Basically what we have is a microphone input. It's kind of hidden behind the power cord here, but you plug the cable into the microphone input on the camera, and then plug that into the output on the bottom of the Tentacle sync or your other timecode source. And then we do the same thing with this as well. So we'll go into camera settings and go down to audio record level, set that for manual, and it's going to be difficult to see on there, but we actually do have a pretty healthy level coming in on that now. So again, anytime we start recording on this camera, it's going to take that timecode audio information, record that as part of the video clip, and then we'll be able to extract that in post-production. Now we're going to take a look at one more device that we can connect in here, and that's going to be this HyperDeck Studio HD Plus Blackmagic, which does have timecode inputs on the back. This is going to be basically the same thing as the camera, the first camera, the Ursa Mini that we did, but because it has a timecode input on here, we can just take a cable meant for doing this, BNC output on one end, and then the 1/8 inch mini jack on the other. Plug that into our timecode source, and then we'll have to go into the menu in order to change that. So it's going to be upside down and blurry for you. I apologize for that. I'll go over to setup. Timecode. Instead of saying video input, we're going to go ahead and click on external and say set, and we should have timecode coming from the Tentacle sync. Now, what do you do if you have multiple cameras and they all need to be synchronized, but you don't want to or can't afford to buy a whole bunch of these type of Tentacle sync devices or other similar products? Well, because this is just audio, we can actually split it however we want. So I'm going to demonstrate a couple things that I've done here. So in my particular situation here in my video production trailer, my timecode output of my ATEM switcher actually goes into my Dante audio network. So what I can do is I can connect any Dante output device, any device that has an audio output that supports Dante, and then connect that to the timecode source on my ATEM switcher, and then I've got timecode. And so that's kind of what I've done here. So I've got this Audinate AVIO device, has an audio output on it, and in the Dante controller software I have mapped my timecode input on one of my mixers to this output device, and now I've got timecode here on this XLR. Now from there we can either plug directly into a camera, or because it's just an analog audio signal, we can just use XLR splitters. So I've got one right here. So what I can do is just take the output of this, and you don't have to do Dante. You don't have to have Dante to make this work. It's like any timecode output will actually give the ability to split the signal and send it however many places you want. And then from there, I've got multiple outputs. So as I'm connecting up at an event, have a short XLR cable go from there to the input on a camera, run an XLR to the next camera, add another splitter there, so run short cable to the camera, and then just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. I can do that as not quite as many times as I want, but the practical limitations, you probably never actually come into a real problem there. But because it's just an analog audio signal, you can actually just do simple splitters like this, and you don't have to do any fancy distribution system in order to make that work. Now, if you're plugging into a camera like this one that doesn't have an XLR audio input, then you'll need to get an adapter cable in order to convert the XLR to that 1/8" mini jack. And then at that point, you'll be able to do the exact same thing. So just split it, plug into the camera, run to the next camera, split it, run, plug into that camera, and so forth. So nice and easy. Now, there's one other thing you can do, and I've done this a handful of times, which makes this even easier if you happen to have the right gear. And I'll bring that in. This is an in-ear monitor system. This is normally used by musicians and other performers to hear their own performance or backing tracks or whatever. It's basically wireless audio, and you have a base station that transmits the signal, and then you have belt packs like this that actually receive the signal, and you plug in headphones here, and the performers are able to hear. Well, these work with timecode too, because it is just an audio signal. So, in order to use this, I take my XLR audio, timecode audio, coming from, in this case, my ATEM switcher, plug that into one of the inputs on the back of the transmitter. And I can take my belt pack, power it up. Then we'll need some kind of adapter cable, which takes the 1/8" mini jack, 3.5mm mini jack there, and converts that to XLR. In the case of running to this small camcorder, it is just the same cable that you use with the Tentacle sync. So you just plug that in like so, and then you'll adjust the volume in order to give you the proper levels on your audio input on your camera, and then hit record like you normally would. So here we have a wireless receiver that's receiving timecode and injecting that into the camera, and then you can use this roam around wherever you want. So now you have a wireless feature, wireless capability with all of your cameras in order to record that timecode signal that's coming from your master timecode source. Now that I've got cameras connected, I've got timecode going into those, I'm going to record a couple of clips here, and then we're going to jump into the synchronization software in order to extract the timecode information from the audio channels, and then we'll jump into an editor and synchronize those clips up. So I just took a quick break and recorded some video clips on the 4 different cameras, and I've copied those over to the computer, and what we're going to do is we're going to get those synchronized up. But in order to do that, we're going to need some software to extract the audio timecode information from 2 of the cameras and convert that to metadata. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to use a piece of software that's called Tentacle Timecode Tool, and this is free. You don't have to own a Tentacle sync device in order to use this. Anybody can use the software. This is for Windows. They also have a similar product for Mac. It's called Tentacle Sync Studio. So you download whichever one is appropriate for your platform. I've already got that installed here, so I'm going to go ahead and launch that Tentacle Timecode Tool. So launch that. And then what you do here is you actually drag and drop the files onto the window, and then we'll convert those. So we need to grab the video clip from the Sony AX53. So let me move this window over here so it's a little easier to do this. But grab the video file and drop it into that window. Okay, and then I'm going to go back, and then I'm going to go to the X70. That's the other camera we have that does not have a timecode input. So we'll take that and drop that in there as well. And you can see in the window here, I know it's going to be a little tiny on your screen, you can see that it's actually already found the timecode information that's in there. It shows you the audio timecode and it shows the file timecode, and those are going to be different because those cameras do not have timecode inputs, so they can't jam sync. Now what this software is going to do is it's going to take that timecode data that it got from the audio and then overwrite the timecode that was generated by the camera. In order to do that, I'm going to go up to the File menu, and I'm going to say Media Export All. And then I'm going to browse to the directory where I want to dump this. I'm going to go ahead and say Select, and I'm going to do Pass-Through for video export, audio and video and export type. And then there's a checkbox here to mute the audio timecode, so you don't have to listen to that any longer. I'm going to click on Export. It goes really fast. There, it's already done it. And at this point, if I was to go into that sync directory, there are the modified timecode, modified video files that include the corrected timecode based on timecode from the audio. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and load Adobe Premiere, and then we're going to drop these things in, and then we're going to synchronize those. So I'll wait for Premiere to load here, And then I'm going to open this recent project. I can go ahead and bring these videos files in. So I'm going to start by going to the hyperdeck. It already has timecode in it, so I can just drop it straight in. Drop that into the project. And then if I go over to the Ursa Mini, it already has the timecode in that file, so I'll just drop it directly in as well. And then for the other two that I actually synchronized, I have to go into the synced folder and grab these modified ones, the ones that we modified in that timecode tool a moment ago. So I'll grab those and then drop those into the project as well. From there, I can just start dropping these onto the timeline. So I've got a timeline already set up here. I'm going to grab the Hyperdeck Studio, drop that into track 1, grab the clip from the Ursa Mini, drag that into track 2, and bring that down to get rid of some of the empty space. Alright, and then I'm going to grab the clip from the X70, that's this MXF file. There we go, and bring that down. And then I'll grab the clip from the AX53. I'll have to temporarily move that over here so I can move that audio clip all the way down here. Grab both of those, and then placement doesn't actually matter here, so I mean I could have left it there at the end. But from here, I'll select all the files, and then right click, and then say synchronize, and then timecode is going to be the default option. Without all those selected, I'm going to click OK. So now we've actually got all of those clips synchronized, and if we want to verify that, we can in Premiere create a multi-camera sequence so we can watch them all at the same time. So I'm going to right click on sync demo here. I'm going to say new sequence from clip, and then within there I'm going to right click on that clip and then say multi-camera enable, and then if I double click on that to bring it up in the source monitor, we can see the four cameras and they should be synchronized. So if I go ahead and hit play, they should be in synchronization. So there it is. That's the gist of it, and the steps with other video editing software is going to be similar. So the main key here is make sure that your video files actually have the right metadata as part of those. And for cameras that do not have their own timecode input, you can actually utilize the audio track and then run it through that timecode tool in order to extract that audio timecode information and modify the file's metadata so that your video editor will know how to synchronize those based on timecode value. So there it is. I'm going to have links to some of the products that I've mentioned here in the description down below. I appreciate you using those. It does help the channel quite a bit when you purchase using those links. The Tentacle sync is a little bit difficult to get right now. They're kind of back-ordered a bit, but if there are ways of getting them, I was able to pick up a couple on eBay. So if that's something that interests you, you might go to eBay to get one of those there. Some of their stuff is available elsewhere. So if you have questions about this, you can leave those in the comment section down below. But even better would be to go over to my Discord server and ask questions there. There will be a channel set up just for that purpose. The link for that is appearing on your screen right now. And there you'll get help from not just me, but the video production community as well. So I'm not the only one that knows how to do this stuff, so other people will be able to reach out. We'll be able to help you out with your questions there as well. So if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. I'm going to be doing video production related content. I try to do it about once a week because I'm still moving into my new home and that's occupying a lot of my time. I don't know if I'm going to be able to maintain that pace right now, but I will definitely be getting back to that pace here before too long. If you want to see me build out my basement as a media suite with my new YouTube studio, a recording studio / video editing suite, and a home theater, I'm documenting that process for those who are paying members of this channel. So click on the join button down below this video or contribute on Patreon, and I'll be posting videos there fairly regularly with updates on the process, detailed descriptions, and on the main channel I'll just be doing some highlight videos kind of summarizing what I've done with that project. And so if that's something that interests you, be sure and check that out. So thanks everyone for watching and have a fantastic day.